It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Opening day is within spitting distance. Can you feel it? Welcome to another edition of Rico Brogna. This is the edition of Rico Brogna. This is when I know opening day is almost here, because now we get down to the nitty-gritty and make very specific Mets-specific predictions. We will do over-unders about the Mets. We will make predictions about most key players on the Mets. We will tell you the win total from the team, or at least we'll try. So this is when we are on the doorstep to the start of a brand new baseball season. And the way we're going to do it today is I'll make predictions. Pete Hoffman will make predictions. And we have a very special guest picker to make predictions with us as well. You may have seen him on YouTube. You can subscribe to his channel, Wardy, and that is Wardy himself. So Wardy, thank you very much for being a guest picker and joining us on this very special edition of Rico Brogna. How excited are you that we are almost there to the start of this baseball season?
Oh, I'm ecstatic, Evan. I mean, just from the time that we first interacted a couple weeks ago in spring training, we were only a couple weeks in, and already it started to feel like a drag. You know, I can only handle spring so much up until the point where I'm like, all right, that's enough. Let's just lock in and get ready for the season. So I can't wait. Just a couple days away.
Where does this rank for you? You're a little bit younger than me, maybe a lot younger than me. I don't know. I can't tell age anymore. Where does this rank for you in terms of excitement going into a season in your lifetime?
I'd have to probably say this is right towards the top of the list for various reasons, right? Because we have the fandom aspect, you know, as a diehard fan my entire life, but especially over the past 10 to 15 years, this means a lot to me because when we had the expectations that we had last year, which was to, again, hopefully make playoffs and then for things to falter as quickly as they did, and then the run the Mets had, that was important. But again, we didn't expect it. This year, we have lofty expectations, greater ones I think I've ever witnessed as a fan in my personal lifetime, at least where I can certainly appreciate it. And then you add in the fact of what both you and I do as talking heads in this Mets space. It's tremendous now because we have been through, in a lot of ways, hell and back with this Mets team. And now to see how far they've come from year one of Steve Cohen and now entering year 5, I mean, if you're not pumped up about that, I don't know how you can't be.
It's a weird combination because there have been years in which I've been excited for the team, but they didn't do anything that huge during the offseason that would lead to it. It's more just feeling good going into a season. And then there are years in which they did do a lot during the offseason. But what were the real expectations? 2005 kind of reminds me of it, where they were coming off a terrible year. They added Beltran and Pedro. It was exciting, but it's not like we had World Series aspirations. This is the first offseason in which those two things coalesce. You've got the expectations of last year getting to the NLCS, and combine that with the fact that they freaking added Juan Soto. And that's where I think this season is unique in terms of hope and expectations, because you got the combination of high expectations coming off a good year, and oh yeah, they went out and added a superstar player.
Right. And that's massive because Juan Soto is a guy that we've been attached to since the start. I feel like as soon as he made his debut as a 19-year-old, a lot of us had the initial reaction, we're hoping and praying one day the Mets can luck out there with a key prospect that they either draft or get through the international free agent signing period. And to see as the years went on, from initially the rumblings, from that Instagram post, that cryptic post, if you remember, Evan, back in 2021, there at Citi Field, making it known that he wants to play in New York. Then he goes to the Yankees, and the entire time you're just saying in the back of your head, I get it. It's the big bad Yankees, but it's still the Steve Cohen ran Mets, and this is a different era, so you can't write them off. And now here we are today with the largest contract in North American sports history. Kind of cool.
Very, very, very cool. I can't wait. Now, I think this is one of the most interesting kind of predictions to make. Who is going to lead this team in innings, and how many innings are they going to throw? And I want to provide a little bit of perspective before we dive into this. Last year, Luis Severino was the answer to the question. He threw 182 innings, which is a very high number, especially in this day and age, to lead the team. The year before that, in 2023, it was Kodai Senga, of all people, 166 in the third innings. The year before that, it was Chris Bassett at 181 innings. This is an eclectic mix of guys. In 2021, it was Marcus Stroman at 179. Wow. And then before that, I don't include 2020, by the way. I eliminate that from our mind.
Of course.
It was Jacob deGrom 3 years in a row, over 200 innings. So it's been Stroman, Bassett, Senga, and Severino. What's kind of weird is all of those guys outside of Stroman, they were in their first year with the Mets when they led the team in innings. So, I've been debating this one in my head all day, Wardy, because I'm like, all right, who am I picking to lead this team in innings? Like, you got the Clay Holmes option. That would be weird considering he's a converted reliever, first year doing it. You got the Senga option, but they're going to handle him with care. David Peterson seems like a decent option, but then I'm starting to think, is it going to be somebody who maybe wasn't even supposed to be in the rotation before this season even started, like a Tyler McGill and Griffin Canning? So I'm going to lay it out there. I think it's going to be Tyler McGill. I have a weird feeling. I know. I'm blowing this whole thing up right away.
Oh, Julie is happy right now. I'm good friends with the McGill family, and trust me, she's pumped up to hear that.
She likes that?
Yeah, she loves that. That's awesome.
I was debating Clay Holmes because I have high hopes for him off of spring training, but screw it. I'm going to start off our prediction episode with getting out of the box. Tyler McGill, 175 innings. He leads the New York Mets in innings. What say you?
Okay, I'm going with a guy that stepped up in similarity to McGill around similar timeline, and that's David Peterson, because Peterson was nails for the Mets when he came back from his hip surgery last year around June, and he was, in my opinion, one of not the most consistent guy for the Mets, while yes, Sean Manaea had greater highs, and we saw lower floors with guys like Jose Quintana. But in the case of Peterson, he was pretty even-keeled all year long. And I know he's not an analytics darling. When you look at his expected numbers, they usually don't favor him. He's usually at least an ERA run by at least one full run, if not two higher each year than what his baseline ERA is. So he's had a lady luck on his side with the infield around him. But I really think we're finally going to get a 30-plus start year out of David Peterson, hopefully at least 170 innings in that category. And if we're going to compare and contrast between himself and McGill, this is no slight on Tyler, but this is apples and oranges, I think, when it comes to consistency in recent years. So for those reasons alone, knowing that Senga, there's a big question mark as to how much we're getting out of him. Holmes, I have all the belief that he's going to be maybe not, again, Cy Young worthy for the Mets, but certainly maybe an all-star caliber pitcher if everything goes right. But even then, is he going to get beyond 130 to 150 innings? Not exactly sure. Peterson feels like he might be that guy.
Yeah, and what's safer about Peterson is that he's safer in this rotation. Like my Tyler McGill one. I know, Hoff, you think I'm a jackass for even saying it. But
you are.
I literally, you know what caused me to go with McGill? I looked at the list of the last 4 years, and I was like, we wouldn't have predicted any of those. Like, literally, who would have sat here and said last year was going to be Sevy, considering the guy hadn't been healthy in a half a decade? So my brain kept pushing me towards something that doesn't make sense, because McGill is not safe. Like, he could literally make 3 or 4 starts and leave the rotation because they want to insert Paul Blackburn or Sean Manaea is healthy. So I know it's out of the box. Hoff, Wardy's got David Peterson. I have Tyler McGill. Are you going to repeat, or are you going to go a little unique on it? Who throws the most innings for the New York?
I'm going very unique. And you did say his name earlier. It's not Clay Holmes. I love Clay Holmes. I have a feeling just the innings limit is going to hit at some point in time. They're not going to be able to get him to as deep as they'd like to. It's going to be Griffin Canning. Guy pitched 171 innings last year. He's going to be the shocker. He's going to be the Sean Manaea of this season. So mark that.
I like that.
I like it. I do, because, look, it's risky because Griffin Canning could lose a rotation spot, much like Tyler McGill, who has options left. That's the other scary part. They could send his ass down to the minor leagues. And yes, I do want to clarify, there's no cheating here. Minor league innings do not count. Tyler McGill has to do it at the major league level. But it could happen. There's something intriguing about Griffin Canning. I don't know if anybody noticed this, and maybe this is just me thinking about windups, because when I was a kid growing up, man, I love to imitate windups of pitchers. Griffin Canning reminds me of David Cone. Like, he's got that same David Cone windup. Now, if he could be 70% as good as him or 50% as good as him, we'd all win. But there you go. 3 different choices. David Peterson for Wardy. I'm going with Tyler McGill. Griffin Canning for leading in innings pitched for the New York Mets. Number 2, who will end up playing the most games for the New York Mets at second base?
Oh.
Jeff McNeil starts the year on the IL. Brett Beatty is clearly going to get the top crack at it, but there's also a lot of options. Luis Angel Acuna may eventually play. Even Ronnie Mauricio may eventually play. This could be one of those things where it could be one of 5 different guys So, Hoff, since you went last on our last prediction, why don't you kick it off? Who ends up playing the most games at second base for the New York Mets in 2025?
I would like it to be Ronnie Mauricio, but that's not going to happen. I think he's just so far behind right now. They're not going to rush him back, and he's very low on the depth chart to get in that call. Even though I think his bat's going to play in baseball eventually, I think that he may be a DH, but he's not going to get the second base spot. It's going to be Luis Angel Acuna. He is going to take that job, but he's going to run with it because the lights shine bright in the majors, not in the minor leagues, not in spring training, baby. Let's freaking go.
Yeah, as long as he's not bored, by games in June or July, obviously. How about you, Wardy?
It's going to be Jeff again. We're stuck. We're still in this purgatory, until the Mets are done with that $30 million left for the remainder of his contract. He's going to be the guy there until he simply hasn't performed well enough to be that guy. And as much as I like the upside in both Beatty and Acuna, and I really do hope one of them runs away with second base this year. I know you've been preaching that a lot to Evan, so hopefully that becomes a reality. But for right now, Jeff at his worst still might be, the best or close to what you're getting in Beatty on the consistent offensive end if we're going to really focus on the previous years at this point. Now, if we're buying all into spring training results, then Brett Beatty should be our starting second baseman every game all year long. But we have to see it to believe it. So I'm going to go more conservative on this one because I really need to see one of Acuna or Beatty actually run away with it for a change.
I agree with you. I do. I'm gonna follow your lead with Jeff McNeil, and it's not because I don't think Beatty isn't going to take advantage of his opportunity. I can see ways where Brett Beatty ends up playing for this team a lot, but It's not necessarily at second base. I think DH is a real avenue for him to play. I love Jesse Winker, but Jesse Winker's been inconsistent in his career. And I think in an ideal world, Jesse Winker's probably a fourth outfielder. He's probably more of a part-time player. So I walk into the world where Beatty hits. Beatty performs in this opportunity he's being given. But then when Jeff McNeil comes back, I don't think it's just automatic that McNeil becomes a bench player. I think he gets an opportunity to play again. And I think Brett Beatty can find his at-bats at DH. I think he could find his at-bats even occasionally at third base with Mark Vientos DHing, or even days where Pete Alonso sits. So, there's a way McNeil ends up playing left field, but I think that leads to a lot of Brandon Nimmo in center, which I don't think they're very keen on. So I think it's likelier that both guys play, but it just ends up with McNeil playing more second base. So I kind of agree with you that even though Beatty's going to get the head start, Jeff McNeil ends up being the guy that plays the most games at second base.
So here's a question for both you and Hoff regarding McNeil, because I've been pondering this past couple of days, and the more I think about it, the more I think it makes most sense. If for whatever reason one of Beatty or Acuna really looks great for the next couple of weeks to start the year, and McNeil, the Mets find themselves with a good problem, should they actually consider if Jeff is willing to sign up? And I know the big thing with Jeff over the years is he willing to sign up mentally for maybe what he's going to be getting himself into? If he commits to the Mets saying, hey, we're going to give you pretty much everyday playing time, but more in a utility role, because he does profile better as a utility player than anyone else for the Mets right now. I mean, if you're not going to bring in a replacement in Iglesias because you don't want someone to block the kids, Jeff has this unique ability by going in the corner outfield sometimes, whether it's because Nimmo is maybe getting some more reps at DH. I think that could be a reality at times with him this year because we don't know what's going to happen a little bit with the plantar fasciitis, the knee, among other things. I just don't know how healthy Brandon's going to be. But when you look at Beatty playing second base, a little bit of short and plenty hot corner this spring, that's great and all. But are the Mets really going to rush him to just be this perfect utility guy when we already have someone that can play a good chunk of the infield as is and the outfield? I think if he's willing to sign up for it, he is a perfect fit for that role.
Yeah, I think that they're kind of different in their potential utility role because we haven't seen a lot of McNeil at third base for whatever reason, even though he's been played everywhere. But we see him a lot in the outfield. I remember we tried to see Beatty in the outfield a couple of years ago. It didn't really work. They haven't taken it that serious. So I think it depends on the things you laid out. Like, okay, where is the available playing time? If Brandon Nimmo is dealing with physical issues and you're DHing him or you're not playing him, then 1,000% Jeff McNeil ends up playing a lot of left field. It just makes sense. He has experience there. He actually is not a bad outfielder. I've always thought that when he's been out there. Like, he's not bad at all. And then you also have the possibility, and I doubt it that much, as we talked about with Nimmo, where if Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri aren't hitting, Nimmo plays a lot of center and McNeil plays a lot of left. I think they're going to move these guys around depending on need. So I think we may see a lot of Jeff McNeil in the outfield. We may see Brett Beatty play a lot of second base or end up DHing or playing third base, depending on who gets hurt. Hopefully nobody gets hurt, but we know the reality of a baseball season. So I think we may see these guys moved around quite a bit throughout this season, depending on what they need. Speaking of center field, they are going with a platoon in center field as of right now of Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri. But you also have the possibility of Nimmo moving to center. You also have the possibility of Drew Gilbert kind of fixing his his struggles from last year and bursting back in. Jet Williams is going to get an opportunity at Double-A. They're on the outside, but who ends up playing more games in center field? Who ends up playing the most games in center field? Obviously, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, the favorites. You've got some young options. I'm going to kick things off by saying Jose Siri. I think that Siri spring training, I don't want to buy into spring training. I really don't want to do it, but I guess in some cases it just happens. I think Siri is going to have the best year he's had in his major league career. I think his batting average will be up. I think he'll hit for some pop. I think he'll play some good defense. And those layouts I just made of young guys stepping up to take the job, it doesn't feel very close. It doesn't feel like that's going to happen anytime soon. It's going to take a lot of Jet Williams in Double-A hitting the crap out of the ball. Drew Gilbert really needs to enhance his value again, and we never saw him in spring training. So I'll go conservative and say Jose Siri will end up playing the most games in center field for the New York Mets. Hoff, go ahead. Center field.
I hate to say it, but you're right. Jose Siri is going to be surprising us with his bat more than anything else because I think he's got 20-plus home run power, and I think that bat's going to play. Tyrone Taylor is going to be serviceable because he's going to come in as defensive replacement a lot. I don't know if it's going to be left field, center field, right field, whatever it is, but Jose Siri is going to get a lot of the playing time in center field.
Yeah, I got to go with Jose Siri as well, but this is all in hand with just my personal bias, and it really doesn't have as much to do with the matchup. But I'll give devil's advocate both ways here. So let's start with why Siri makes most sense. It's because while yes, he has the lowest floor between him and Tyrone, like this is a guy that could be off the Mets roster by halfway through the season if he's say batting only $170 and they're fed up. But at the same time, his defense is so unbelievably good that alone is why the Mets are going to have him playing a boatload this year. Not only just based on certain matchups to be favorable for pitching, but when you have a guy that's in like the 99th percentile and outs above average and has a cannon of an arm where if he's backing up Juan Soto deep in right field, he can comfortably throw you out at the hot corner. That's tremendous. And then you have the speed, you have the bat to ball skills with the home run power. He runs into them big time, but he's just so Jekyll and Hyde. I think that bat is perfectly fine to be Jekyll and Hyde with how deep this Mets lineup is already. As long as they don't have drastic injuries throughout the year, I see him thriving in that role. And I do think he is going to have his best year because he's going to get more pitches to hit and he's going to have a lot of opportunity with runners on. So we'll see what happens with Siri. But in the case of Taylor, why he would make most sense is just because he doesn't have as low of a floor as as Siri. And if you look last year, especially towards the end of the year, Tyrone won the job easily over Harrison Bader because Bader's bat completely fell off. And then he's continuing to try to like singles into doubles, which I don't know why, but that was something that he was doing. So Bader, while he wasn't terrible, was boxed out, and Tyrone Taylor was what you needed him to be at minimum. So I think there's fair arguments for both sides here.
Yeah. So speaking of which, just on topic, because I know you've talked about it. I've talked about it, the Alexander Canario situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what should the Mets do? I mean, they made a smart deal in acquiring him, but the reason they were able to acquire him is because he didn't have any options left. So the Cubs DFA'd him. They kind of knew there wasn't a role for him. He comes here. It opens up the possibility of trading Starling Marte, which I remain not in favor of, because I do think that Marte, you talk about ceilings and floors, the ceiling of Starling Marte as a right-handed DH to me is through the roof. I think this is the perfect role for him because he doesn't have to run around in the outfield all the time, because he is going to be put in favorable matchups, and there's just a greater chance he's going to stay healthy. So I am not on the train of trading Starling Marte, but I also understand kind of the issue that they're in where Canario had a good camp. He's still young. He still has a lot of potential. It sucks to just lose him. I've gotten a few emails about this. I want to throw this at both of you. The idea that the odd man out should just be Tyrone Taylor, that maybe the Mets should kind of look around. There are teams that could use a Tyrone Taylor. The Yankees could freaking use Tyrone Taylor and actually move him. You know, you mentioned the positives of Jose Siri. Now you throw Canario into that outfield mix. You keep him around. I think he's got more potential than Tyrone Taylor. His ceiling is a lot higher. I don't think you're getting a lot back necessarily, but would you guys be in favor of looking to shop Tyrone Taylor to make room for Alexander Canario?
I would have to say it really depends on, I think, a little bit of the startup of the year. And I know that is really not going to make too much sense if you're trying to make a roster room for Canario. So my big bugaboo with getting rid of Tyrone is what I just told you, and knowing what you're getting at minimum from him. And you're not getting that same comfortability. Whereas Siri and Canario are two guys that could literally play out of the Mets lineup and out of the Mets roster within a couple months of the year if things really don't go right. And that's my big concern, because Canarios look great in limited sample sizes we've seen with the Cubs over the past couple of years, and I'd expect that to continue, but you're still taking that risk, that calculated risk. Whereas if they don't work out, then the Mets are going to have to figure out, do we maybe shift Brandon Nimmo to get more center field reps? Not that we want to, but now that we kind of have to, which is then going to move a guy like Jesse Winker to get more reps, and the corner outfield, if not someone like Jeff McNeil and others. So it's a fair question, but I really don't know how to feel about one way or the other. Hoff, what about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely trading Tyrone Taylor if you got a good piece coming back. No problem with it, because right now I think that Tyrone Taylor all he is a utility for the. He's a fourth outfielder. He's a guy that can play any position for defensive replacement. But Canario definitely gives you more offense for sure, and you can find that defensive replacement. You can find that fourth outfielder. Hell, you just said Jeff McNeil. If he's going to be the utility guy, he could play anywhere. If that's what we're going to do, if that's what you're going to utilize him as, I'm open to it. Then you have that guy already. So I'd like to give Canario a chance. I know it's probably unlikely, but I would trade Tyrone Taylor tomorrow.
Yeah, this is all not going to happen, by the way. It was a nice discussion, but
I hope he clears through waivers. That's the fingers crossed. That's what Stearns wants. That's what we're all praying for, and we're probably not going to see it happen.
Yeah, I can't imagine that it would happen, just because, like, I'm sitting here, doing sports talk radio in New York, and I see the Yankee issues, and I see the holes that they have. Alexander Canario is perfect for the New York Yankees. Like, he would basically be, not to turn this into the Hensley Mullins, they'd basically be the right-handed DH for Ben Rice, basically, because Stanton ain't walking through that door. Plus, he could also play some right field when you DH young Carl. Like, I'm just saying, if I can easily tell you the Yankees should claim him, then I'm sure there are other teams in baseball where it makes sense, where they're not going to let Canario sneak through waivers. As we all head out to Citi Field this season, celebrate your highlights with Mio Sparkling Sake, a true crowd pleaser, light, bubbly, and easy to enjoy. Whether you're at Citi Field or your favorite spot, ask for Mio Sparkling Sake by name, a new tradition, served chilled, imported from Japan, the official sake of Rico Brogna. Enjoy responsibly. In fact, I've got a bottle right over here. Look at that. There you go. This is my Mio Sake, ready to roll. All pumped up for the start of a brand new baseball season. All right. This is a prediction that is so random that I wish you all the best here. The return date of Francisco Alvarez. All right. He's out for God knows how long. I think they told us 6 to 8 weeks, actually, when he got hurt. We were down there for that. You were too, 40, when that
it was terrible. I woke up after a long night the day before. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is how we're starting our day? Bro, horrendous.
Our situation was so weird. So we got down there, I think the day you did. It's Saturday. Right. Or is it Sunday at this point? No, it's Sunday.
Okay.
So we were there Saturday. Sunday, we go to Port St. Lucie. And we're going to do some interviews, have some fun on the field. We're in the dugout. And Mendy walks by. Very nice. He's like, hey, I'll talk to you guys in a few minutes. Sits down with that bat in his hand. Hoff and I are 2 feet away from him. Looks into the camera and is like, yeah, we got some injury news. Francisco Alvarez is out 6 to 8 weeks. I punched Hoffman because I'm pissed off. But what am I going to say? I'm sitting there in the Met dugout 5 feet away from him. So, yeah, we had a unique way of finding out, but it was very it sucks, honestly. Like, there's no one to be mad at. It's unfortunate. This is a big year for Francisco, and it stinks he's going to be out for a while. Give me a date. Let's see how positive or negative you are, Wardy. Give me a date on when Francisco Alvarez returns and is activated by the New York Mets.
Can you guys be a mathematician for me and tell me how many more weeks he has roughly as of
All
now?
right, so let's play this game.
Okay.
So he got hurt about 2.5 weeks ago, right? So it was right around March 8th. We are recording this on a beautiful Tuesday night, March 25th. So we're at about 2.5 weeks. So I think they said 6 to 8 weeks. Was that the initial
They
diagnosis?
said 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks.
So we've got another 4 to 6 weeks. Actually, when you think about it that way, it's actually not that bad. All right, so there you go. 4 to 6 weeks. What's your guess?
I'm going to go with May 14th. We're going all the way. I think we're going as far basically as we could possibly go. Just because when it comes to a thumb injury, this isn't the first rodeo with Alvarez. They have no reason to rush anything, right? Unless things just go completely upside down, or the first couple of weeks with Luis Torrens and Hayden Senger, who I'd assume will be the backup catcher for the Mets. I don't see Alvarez coming back too fast, and maybe I'm going a little too far on the date, but I think that's a comfortable one for me because you never know with this Mets team.
I don't think you're going too far because I actually have an even later date. Because I do think, and I'm not being negative. Like, I think sometimes with this, it's like, oh, you're being, no, I'm being conservative. I think you actually hit it. That I think they want to take it easy. I think they want to make sure that he comes back and he's successful. And sometimes when you're dealing with a thumb issue like that, it's actually going to affect your power. It's going to affect your ability to hit. So why not give him a little bit more time in rehab? And remember, you've got a 30-day window once you open up the rehab. And I think it's possible the Mets use a lot of that just to make sure he's healthy. So I'm actually going to go with Memorial Day weekend. Actually, a little after Memorial Day weekend. I'm going to go with Monday afternoon, May 26th, Memorial Day Monday against the Chicago White Sox. He misses the Dodger series. I'm looking at the schedule right now. So the only reason I know that, I haven't memorized the entire schedule. But I'm going to go Monday, May 26th against the White Sox. So he will miss the full 2 months, and that would put him on the kind of the back end of that time frame. But again, they also may extend and allow him to play a lot of rehab games to make sure he's healthy. So I'm going May 26th.
Yeah, you're both wrong. It's going to be later than that. Listen, Mark Teixeira. Listen, here's the thing: is Mark Teixeira had this injury, and he was a first baseman. He wasn't a catcher. That injury on his catching hand, he's going to take a lot of impact there. The hamate bone sucks. It's going to be July 1st. It's because they're not going to rush him. It's going to take some time.
So we're bringing it back for the LA series where this all started last year. I don't need that. We don't need that. What are you talking about?
Listen, this is not a good injury. I feel like we're making this very light. It says 6 to 8 weeks, but this is a bad injury, especially for a catcher.
Wow. I thought I was going to be the negative one. I was like, yeah, not that bad.
I said I trumped that shit.
Yeah. No, you really did. All right, let's get to some individual player performances. And I think this guy is very important this season. He's certainly talked a very big game at times this offseason, including the other day in that Q&A he did with Tim Healy where he said, we're taking over New York. And that is Brandon Nimmo. And the over-under I want to set because I think this is the best way to gauge him. His power's obviously been up the last few years, hitting 24 home runs, 23 home runs. His average was way down, but the real indicator of Brandon Nimmo to me is his OPS. Over-under 800. It was under this year by a significant margin. Obviously, the terrible second half had a lot to do with it. His career OPS is 809. His years before this, 4 straight years above 800. So this would kind of be him getting back to who he is. Over, under 800, Brandon Nimmo OPS. And I'll start off by being positive. I think it will be an over. I don't think it's going to be necessarily the 888 of 2020. But I definitely like it right around his career average because I don't think last year was indicative of Brandon Nimmo. I think the second half was not who he is. And I'm going to trust that first half Brandon Nimmo and then 2023 Brandon Nimmo and 2022 Brandon Nimmo when he went out and played is truly who he is. And that was a guy with an 800 OPS, 829 OPS, and over 800 OPS before he had the terrible second half. So I'm going to go over on OPS Brandon Nimmo. Before you even go, Wardy, Hoff's very predictable. He hates Brandon Nimmo. I don't know what happened. I don't know if there was an incident or something.
Brandon Nimmo?
It's Brandon Nimmo.
Imagine hating Brandon Nimmo. What happened?
It's not that I hate him. I dislike how he plays baseball.
Why?
Why?
Because he's not as productive as everyone makes him out to be. I got to tell you something. Last year was another year where he disappointed. The second half of the season was terrible. And it could be injury issues. I get it. And I got to be
fasciitis. He was cooked.
Okay. But before that, too, his value as a leadoff hitter was overrated. He would get on first base and stand there. That's not what I'm looking for. I want people that are going to move, and it's not going to be first or third off of a single or whatever it is. I need some stolen bases. I need something. And let me tell you something. He's going to be under. He's going to be under 800, and the reason why, he's just not healthy. Evan, I asked you this, and Warren,
yes.
you could tell me what you think. Who is Brandon Nimmo? I don't think he even knows anymore. Is he supposed to be a power hitter, or is he a guy who's trying to get on base? I think he's too much swing and miss now, and I do think that he's going to be under 800 because he is injured. He's going to be injured this season, and it's going to be chronic, and it's going to be a long, outstanding season for him.
I think that they are going to handle him very differently than the last 2 years. I think Carlos Mendoza's made that pretty clear. Like, he's going to get off days. He's going to DH days. Like, I don't think as much as he wants to play every day, I think that's the one thing that's going to help him is that they're not going to run him out every single day.
So I think Nimmo's going to have an above 800 OPS, and here's why. The on-base percentage, I think, is going to be in similarity to last year. It's going to be in the 330 to 340 range, not the 360, 370 plus dynamo like he usually is. Why? Because he's not the plate setter for the team anymore. Right. He is clearly not the plate setter anymore. When you have Lindor, Soto, and Alonso ahead of you, his goal right there is to drive in runs. That's why you're going to have him batting fourth mainly against righties, and then Vientos will be batting fourth mainly against lefties. He's going to be in a lot of prime positions to actually exemplify more of that power. So I expect the slugging to go up, where he's going to be in the 450 range or so, which is going to lead him to above the 800 OPS. So I'm not expecting him to be the OBB king like he's been in recent years, because I think we're actually going to see more of what Nimmo is going to become in the second half of his career as more of that true gap-to-gap power threat. A guy that could hit 30 home runs if he stays healthy, but how many games are we getting out of him? That's a big question.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's such a different role. Now,
right,
when the season starts, kind of like last year, things can change. You know, Brandon Nimmo was the table setter last year, and then obviously we saw the big lineup changes. I don't think we're going to get big lineup changes. I think that would be concerning. Something bad would have to happen, but you never know. I mean, it is entirely possible that we're in some weird world where we're sitting here in June and it's Nimmo, Soto, Lindor, 1, 2, 3. I don't bet on that, but it's baseball. It's very volatile. So you just don't know. But I'm with you. I'm kind of confident that Nimmo has a bounce back year, because I think that if he isn't healthy, he's not going to play. I think that's the difference. Last year, I think he ran out there in the second half, and like you said, he was completely cooked. Let's get to the apple of our eye, the great Juan Soto. And there's a lot of Juan Soto over-unders to go through, but I want to start off with one that I guess could annoy some people, but I think it's just him having a great eye. Will Juan Soto set a new career high in walks this season? His career high, just so we know, is 145 back in 2021. Last year with the Yankees, he walked 129 times. Obviously, he featured the protection of Aaron Judge, and I love Pete Alonso. I'd love to give him a bear hug right now. He's not Aaron Judge. There are very few guys in the sport that are. So Soto's led the league 3 times, but 145 is his career high. Will Juan Soto set a new career high in walks in 2025? Wardy, I'll let you kick this one off.
So when we go back to his career high season, who was the man batting behind him?
It's a great question. I'm going to give you that answer in the next 35 seconds.
Okay, because I think that's important, right? Because I think for all those reasons, that probably has me thinking, yeah, this could be his, season record-breaking year, especially with Alonso batting behind him for what's going to likely be the entire season. It just feels like he's going to get absolutely attacked. And while Soto is obviously going to get his home runs, get on base plenty, and go gap to gap, he's not going to be challenged in a lot of scenarios. He's going to get Bonds treatment at times, probably more times than maybe what we've seen in recent years. So for that reason, I'm probably actually going to agree that he's going to get above 145.
So looking at the Nationals that year, early in the year, it was mostly Ryan Zimmerman. Okay. Then it was a little bit of Josh Bell. Then it was Kyle Schwarber for a period of time. Then it was Josh Bell again. And then... yeah, it was basically Josh Bell a majority of the second half. Bell had a good year that year, in fairness. I know sometimes we think of it and we're like, that sucks. Now, Soto, it came out in that SI article, which was very well done by Tom Verducci, where he went through the courting that the Mets had of Juan Soto. And apparently in that contentious meeting that Soto, Boris, and Cohen and Stearns had, Soto directly told Steve Cohen, I need protection. So this is clearly something he's thought about, and that he never really had protection until Manny Machado and then obviously Aaron Judge a year ago. And just going through the names of 2021, with all due respect to Kyle Schwarber and Josh Bell and Ryan Zimmerman, that's not great. So I definitely think that added to that number. But as much as I love Pete Alonso, and I don't know if Mark Vientos eventually switches with him, but what kind of year he's having, I don't think those guys, as good as they are going to cause pitchers to say, I have to attack Juan Soto. He's still Juan Soto. You're still going to make the decision to not face him and go after an Alonso or Vientos. We saw this last year in the playoffs. I thought it was unbelievable. Judge was slumping. I get it. I get he was absolutely struggling in the playoffs. Teams were walking Juan Soto to get to Aaron Judge. And yes, a part of it was the slump of Judge, but it was mostly that Juan Soto's that effing good. Like, that's really what it was about. I think Yankee fans kind of construed it as, boy, what a slap in the face to Aaron Judge. If it was Gleyber Torres hitting ahead of Aaron Judge, they weren't walking him. You know what I mean? Like, right. It was because it's Juan Soto. So I think he's going to be right near that number. And I think Soto's eye is also so ridiculously good. I think it's even better than it was in 2021. I think he is going to spit on balls that are close. He is not going to be intimidated like, oh, I have to be more aggressive because I'm making $765 million. I'm gonna say Soto does set a new career high in walks. I am.
I'm going to say no, and it's not because he's not going to get walked a lot the first half. I think eventually whoever's behind him, whether it is Pete or whether Vientos takes over that spot, someone's going to start hitting crazy, and they're going to have to start to pitch to Soto a little bit. I know that you said that, hey, you know, they walk Soto to get the Judge, but I think that slumping in the playoffs has something to do with that too, which is why they had no problem pitching to Judge. I think if Vientos catches fire, listen, I think Vientos, and I'm not sure if this is a question, I think Vientos is hitting 40 home runs this year. That's what I think. So if he's going to be the guy behind Soto, eventually they're going to start to pitch to Soto a little bit more.
Since you said that, we got to jump ahead now because we do have an over-under on Mark Vientos home runs.
There we go.
Okay.
The number, and these numbers, by the way, that I'm about to get to with some of these over-unders, they are not made up by me. It's like literal. I forget which gambling website. I probably should give them a pop or something, but it was some kind of gambling website. I just forget which one that actually had these numbers. So these are real over-under numbers. This is not me just making it up. The Vientos number, though, is really low. You said he's going to hit 40, so clearly you're taking the over. The over-under on Mark Vientos home runs is 27.5, which is the number he hit this past year. Obviously, he also didn't play a lot early in the season because he was in the minor leagues. Over-under on Vientos, 27.5 home runs, Wardy. You going over? Under? How you feel?
I'm going easy over here. And this goes in hand with a great conversation I had with the Vientos family at one of the spring training games we were at, I think, around the same time. Funny enough, they were sitting front row right in front of me. And I didn't know what they looked like, but Charles's dad looks identical to him. So I could tell right away, talk to them. That was really cool. And when breaking it down and just evaluating Mark's game, he hit an opposite field home run that game that we saw. And just the confidence that he's had so far in spring training, he said how versus last year, as everything was really a sprint to just make sure he cracked the roster when he got up here and ran away with it. Whereas now he knows what his role is. He's comfortable here. And we saw him have the playoff heroics the way that he did. Missed me with the nonsense. I know he had some defensive issues, but he also made up for it with the home run ball in some of those same exact playoff games. So Mark in 27 home runs in 111 games last year. Why won't he get at least 30 this year, right? And now with the big counter with him, and this is exactly why he's only at 27.5, is because Vientos was also one of the luckiest batters in baseball last year per BABIP. So there's a big question as to, okay, he's going to be getting attacked a lot harder by pitchers this year. How is he going to fare? He's looked great in spring. We know that. I think we're going to get more of the same from him, but this will be a big test to see how he handles a full 162.
Francisco Lindor's over. Oh, by the way, I should answer. I never answered.
Yeah.
I was forgotten. Yeah, it's one of those things, and you laid it out beautifully on why they're disrespecting him. But sometimes in gambling, you hear a number and you're like, that doesn't make sense. And then you bet against it. And then when it's all said and done, you're like, damn it, how did they know? With that said, I throw it out the window. I think he's going to hit more than 27.5 home runs. I would take the over. I don't think he's hitting 40. I don't think he's going to crush that number. What I think is going to be really interesting is how many guys can the Mets get to hit 30 home runs? Because they've got a lot of guys who have that shot to get to that number.
How many times have the Mets in their career gone 30, 30, 30? Have three guys with 30 or 30 more home runs?
So I'm going to think back to 2006. That's going to be the year that jumps out at me with Beltran. And I don't think David hit 30 home runs in 2006, though. If I had to look that up.
The answer is zero.
So
they've never.
What did everybody hit in 2006 then?
Wow.
I think someone came short. I think it was like 26 or 27 home runs.
Yeah, I think David Wright didn't get to 30. Here are the numbers right now. I'll give you the answer. Delgado at 38. Beltran hit 41. So there's your two they covered it easily. David hit 26. And that's it. Like, then there was no one even close. Reyes hit 19. Valentin at 18. Xavier Nady hit 14, which was only in half a season because they traded his ass. So that one doesn't count. Yeah,
there may be 4 guys on this team that hit 30-plus home runs. I mean,
so
that's crazy, dude.
Let's go through this. Let's be fair. So we've already done the Vientos home run number. We're all taking the over right around 30. All right, you're going 40, but he'll hit over 27 and a half, close to 30. Juan Soto's number is 33 and a half. Okay. Last year, he had a career high in home runs. I think Yankee Stadium, though Citi Field's a great place for him to hit. Like, his power to left center field is actually going to be translating better in Citi than Yankee Stadium. And we all know his career numbers at Citi Field have been tremendous. So I don't even know if I could use that whole lame old Yankee Stadium argument. It's probably more the protection of Aaron Judge. I happen to think protection still matters. I know that there's a thought that it doesn't. But he hit 41 last year. He hit 35 the year before. His over-under is 33 and a half. Hoff, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, he's going to be over. There's no doubt about it. And I'm not going to say he's going to hit 40 home runs. That's not going to happen. But he's going to hit around the 35, 36 mark. He's just that good of a hitter. And he's not at that Barry Bonds point yet. But I think eventually he will get to that point where he sees a ball, it's over the plate. It's just going to go over the fence.
I couldn't.
You going
agree
over
more.
under? How you feeling, Wardy?
Yeah, definitely going over, and I'm right with you guys. I don't know if he's going to get 40 this year, but he very well could get close to time because let's not forget, Juan Soto's been in the league for a while now, but he still hasn't even hit his peak prime. Like, that's the most insane thing about this, and that's exactly why they invested as much as they did into him, right? Like, the idea that this could be a guy that's consistently a 40-plus home run hitter for you while doing things offensively that only 2 or 3 other batters in MLB's history have done since arriving in the league. You know, that's some great company. So, yeah, I'm going with you guys on the over.
I think he's right at that number. I think, like, if I had to guess, I think he's hitting 33 home runs. It's tough to take the under, though, because it's a half a home run. But I think that number I just think it's spot on. Like, I think that's the range he's going to be in. So I'll take the under, even though I don't really want to. But I think he's going to be right at 33 home runs. Why are you shaking your head off? Like, why is that so hard? I didn't say he's going to 220. I said he's going to 33 home runs.
I'm just laughing. It's okay. I'm taking the over. It's all right. You can be wrong once in a while.
Let's get to Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso's number is 34 and a half. I'll save everybody the time. He's going to take the over on that. Or I'm going to take the over on that because I don't know what his average is going to be. Honestly, I don't even really care what his average is going to be, to be perfectly honest. I think with Pete, he's going to hit a lot of home runs. It's a matter of how clutch they are. I think the big criticism Pete faced last year until the playoffs was how many of those home runs were pivotal. And we did a whole Rico where we analyzed every freaking home run he hit to find out if it was clutch or not. I think with the experience of last year out of the way, I think with the success he had in the postseason, kind of getting that monkey off his back, I do think Pete's going to have a really good year. I don't think it's going to be a career season. Like, I'm not going to tell you he's going to put together the Aaron Judge walk year numbers, but I think he's hitting 40 home runs. I think he's going to clear that number. So when I see 34 and a half, I'm like, easily, he's going to clear that number. I think Pete will hit more home runs than anybody on this team. I think he will lead the team. He'll hit more than Soto. I think he'll hit more than Mark Vientos. I think it's over 40. So an easy over on Pete Alonso at 34 and a half. Wardy.
Yeah, easy over as well. This is another walk year for Pete, but there's a different dynamic to it by having Soto in the lineup for the first time, one. But secondly, I think the most important one that can't be overlooked is him batting potentially in the 3-hole all year long, just maximizing every opportunity to get a guaranteed first inning at bat versus how many games over the years have we seen Alonso not get that because the Mets go 1, 2, 3, and that's that with their offense right away. So yeah, I think Alonso is not going to feel the pressure as much as last year. He's going to feed more off of that playoff run. And when looking in clutch time, we're going to get more of the Alonso of old back in 2022, especially hitting for opposite field if need be versus what we got over the past year and a half.
I'm intrigued by RBIs for him too, because you have to think with Lindor and Soto hitting ahead of him, he is going to be coming up to the plate with guys on base constantly. And so you almost think accidentally he's going to drive an over 100 runs. I was surprised how low his RBI over under was. It's actually 92 and a half.
That's
obviously
that's crazy.
I think that's crazy. And I know RBIs are very dependent on your teammates, but I'm looking at his teammates. I'm analyzing who's hitting ahead of him. And I'm like, if he's average in the clutch, he should drive an over 100 runs. I would think that number is going to be 115, 120. I expect that number to be 115, 120, especially if we think he's hitting 40 home runs in this lineup.
I mean, some people think that he's, he's had back-to-back years of, decreasing, home run power and just everything like that. So
he has, I get that. That's fine.
So I think part of that is that's what the numbers scream to me. Like they just underestimating how good he really can be. And I think you're right. I think he took a deep breath last year after that home run in Milwaukee, and he's just going to be back to his normal self. It's going to be a little bit the monkey's off his back now, like you said. So I feel comfortable. Definitely over 40 home runs on top of being over 30, 36 or whatever the number is. And then what's the RBI total over under? It's 92, you said?
92 and a half, which
it's going to be no problem over that.
I mean, he better get over 92 and a half. I tell you,
yeah.
We're going to be crushing him if he doesn't.
Here's my hot take. I think Alonso potentially has a career in RBIs, and it just is in direct hand with that lineup. And I really don't think it's a crazy take. I think if anything, it's lukewarm on the hotness scale, because if Alonso just goes back to, again, being more of that guy who had such a balanced approach, I can't emphasize enough. And Evan, I would love to know your thoughts on this. What was, in your opinion, the best approach we've ever seen from Alonso at the plate? Because there's nothing that, in my opinion, is better than the 2022 season. It wasn't the inflated 2019 juice numbers as that rookie. Right. It was actually a guy who was balanced and clutch in scoring position and was willing to not just poke at opposite field, but also be able to hit for power, get those opposite field doubles every now and then too. He was going the opposite way in direct hand by beating the shift, and something that both he and McNeil deviate away from a lot over the past 2 years is exactly that, because there isn't a shift to deviate away from. So you don't have Jeff trying to slap it Oppo the way he used to down the third baseline, the same way Pete isn't going to have his way to poke at Oppo in the right field. And if he does more of that and spreads the field, I think that this could be potentially the best year yet for him.
They both, it's crazy to think this, because I don't think any of us, or certainly I wouldn't have predicted it when it happened. Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil got hurt by the shift. Like their batting averages in the 2 years since, it's been greatly, greatly affected. So that year, 2022, he drove in 131 runs. He led the league. Can he match that number this year? That's a massive year if he's able to pull that off. That's a massive year. That means like he's naturally going to hit for a higher batting average because he's going to come through with a lot more base hits. There's just no doubt. He's going to hit the 40 home runs like he hit in 2022. That would be incredible. If he pulls that off, then I think you're looking at an offense that's as dynamic as we need it to be. But he's driven in 131 runs. In 2023, driven 118. And that was the year he hit 217, which is just a reminder that batting average can indeed be overrated. But yeah, I'm expecting a very good year out of Pete Alonso. The Lindor over-under I want to address. It's 27.5. Now, Lindor has put together years in which since he got here, he's gotten better every single year. His first year, he only hit 20 home runs. He hit 230. He did not have a great year his first year here. We call that the thumbs down year, if we're defining it by anything. In 2022, it goes up to 26 home runs. Then 2 years ago, it's 31 home runs. And then obviously last year, he hits 33 home runs, finished a second in the MVP race. The number is 27.5. And I'm high on Pete. I'm high on Juan Soto. I think Brandon Nimmo bounces back. I have a very tough time believing Lindor is going to match his year of last year. I'm calling it like it is. I don't think it's going to be a bad year. I don't think this is going to be the thumbs down year by any stretch, but I don't think he's hitting 30 home runs. I don't even think he's hitting 27.5. I'm going to take the under. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to have a bad year. I still think he can hit in that kind of same average range, 275. I still think his OPS will be 800, 805. I still think he'll give you gold glove defense, but I don't think we're talking about him as the MVP. And that's not a rip. It's just reality. It's tough to have MVP years every single year. So in terms of home runs, I'm going to take the under 27.5 on Francisco Lindor. Hoff, where are you going with this?
See, I understand why you say it, but on the other hand, I look at it going, he had that type of year, and he really only started hitting at the end of May. So it's almost unfathomable to me to say that he's going to hit the under home run wise. I do think he's not going to hit the 30 home run mark. I think he's going to get closer to 27, 28, but he'll hit the over. And I think that he's just going to again, I think everyone's going to see pitches eventually at some point in time in that lineup. They're just going to have to, because it's the right now, if once Francisco Alvarez comes back in this lineup, it's just going to be so healthy. You're going to have to. There's no soft spot in the lineup. So I think that Lindor is going to find his way, get close to that 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases, 30 doubles. He's going to be under a little bit on the home runs. But again, I do believe he'll be over on that home run total.
I agree with you, Hoff. I think he's going to be just over on the 27.5. But if he isn't, it's going to be because of health first and foremost. Because when we look at the 2021 season where he had 20 bombs, he only played 125 games that year, right? Versus last year, 33 home runs and like just over 150 innings. So I'm going with the assumption that Lindor may miss anywhere from 10 to 15 plus games this year, just because we don't know what's going to happen with that back. He's at a point in his career right now where it's peak prime, but we saw already the early ailment that he sustained last year. And you have to wonder if this is something that does nag him at a time where the Mets are a bit more conservative, if he actually is not going to be as stubborn and say, oh, you can't take me out of the game in the ninth inning when we're up 10-0. I think that there will be some slight differences that take away a smidge of playing time, but unless he gets hurt again of significance, I'd expect him to still hammer the over.
Now, it is our time to make a bold prediction. A prediction that isn't, I think the Mets are going to win 85 games. Like a bold prediction. And I want to give you an example, because this is my bold prediction, and I may have hinted at this a few times over the last few weeks, but I'm just going to go out and say it. At the trade deadline, I'm calling my shot. The New York Mets will acquire at the trade deadline, and this is a massive acquisition. They will acquire Sandy Alcantara from the Miami Marlins. That is my bold. You're both shaking your head. You think that's a terrible bold prediction?
No, I knew it. I was saying in my head the entire time. I was like, "You're gonna say Sandy," because he's just like it's just this pearly diamond that just it's staring right at you. You have to go and grab it. That's how I felt. It was the case with Jesus Luzardo to a degree, even coming off a down year, and he gets traded to the Phillies, right? So Marlins obviously aren't opposed to trading within their division with Peter Bendick. So if they're interested, I'm interested too.
And I think that David Stearns, it was in that interview he did a couple of days ago on the Met broadcast where Gary Cohen was asking about Jet Williams and asking about the prospects. And Stearns said, hey, if they end up helping us at the major league level or they end up helping us acquiring a player, then it's a victory. So I think he is more open to making the big kind of trade and just learning the DNA of David Stearns. Like Dylan Cease, I get why everyone's intrigued by him. He's a free agent at the end of the year. And there's certainly no guarantee or confidence I have that the Mets are then going to say, okay, here's a 6-year contract. Because they don't want to do that. Sandy is signed for multiple years and he's affordable. So I think that he's the guy. It's like Juan Soto in free agency. He was the guy they were waiting for. He was the guy you said, that's who we go all in for. And I think when it comes to trades of pitchers, that's the guy you go after because of the team control, because he's in the prime of his career. Obviously, he's got questions coming off Tommy John surgery. I think he's the guy. So that's my bold prediction. Now, do you guys have a bold prediction about this New York Met team, whether it's an acquisition or something that happens that may surprise us?
I thought that my Griffin Canning being over 180 innings was bold.
That is bold.
Tyler McGill.
That's true. That's actually true. That's a great point. He's got
I do have one though, and I'm gonna. Yes. It's gonna be a good bold prediction, but kind of sour at the same time. Edwin Diaz is going to opt out of his contract at the end of the season, which means he's going to have a hell of a season this year for the Mets. I'm not saying he's going to break a record with saves, but he's going to get back to that really elite level closing pitcher for us.
The bold prediction around Diaz would have been Edwin Diaz is going to win the National League Cy Young. Like, there you go. Yeah, it's tough for a reliever to do it. It can happen. It's happened. That'd be a bold prediction. But all right, Edwin Diaz is going to opt out. Wardy, give us your bold prediction.
Okay, I'm going to give you the one that popped in my head because you're talking about trades right away, and I love the rumor season. I'm not going to go with Sandy Alcantara, but we're going to stay on the pitching topic. We're going to talk about actually a former teammate of Sandy's, that being Pablo Lopez from the Minnesota Twins. If the Twins find themselves on the outside looking in fairly significantly by the deadline, where when it comes to them, what's their big bugaboo? It's always their health. With Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa. If that core isn't healthy, they're going to have problems. And that's already been an issue to start the year with Royce Lewis again, for example. So when I look at Minnesota, I think that they just have various pitchers to pick from. Not only him, they obviously have Joe Ryan and Ober, who are a bit more controllable, but Lopez is an innings eater. He's tremendous with his K per nine every single year. And he obviously knows how to pitch in Citi Field, hasn't been able to handle the Mets at all, but at least maybe now being on our side, it could be a good thing. So I'm going to stay on that bullet pick route. And if I'm going to go internally for whatever reason, then let's just say one of Brett Baty or Luis Angel Acuna finally solidifies himself as an everyday player for the Mets. That'd be cool.
Now, here's what matters for everyone out there. How does this season go for our team? How many wins do they have? And where does it end? Does it end by not making the playoffs? Does it end by making the playoffs and getting knocked out here or there? My gut on this, because I've been going back and forth. I don't think we're winning the division. I'd love to win the division. I do think there's a value in winning the division. It's not the end-all be-all, as we've seen. But if you ask me today, as we get ready for the start of this baseball season, yes, I want to win the NL East. Yes, that would be very nice to skip the wild card round and just go right to game one of the divisional series, assuming they win the division and finish with a top 2 record. I don't have confidence in that. I think the Braves are going to have a huge bounce-back season. I think the Phillies are maybe not as good as the talent seems, especially when you look at the age on some of the guys in the middle of their lineup. But I think we're going to win 89 games. Now, that is the same number as last year. I think we're going to get to that number in a very different way. I don't think we're going to have an abysmal May. Like, I don't think we're going to be sitting here around Memorial Day saying, what are we doing with our lives? So I think it'll be a more consistent 89. I think it's going to be a solid 89, and I think it will be good enough to make the postseason. And I think we get back to the National League Championship Series. So I think we lose there, unfortunately. I don't think I'll ever have the stones to ever say we'll win a world championship. Like, even if we're in the World Series, I'll always believe we'll lose. And I think it's just because I've never seen any of my teams win. So it's kind of in my DNA that if I can't see it happening, how can I sit here predicting it? But I'm going 89 wins and back to the NLCS. Wardy, officially, you've been watching the Mets, covering the Mets, analyzing the Mets. How many wins? Where does this season go?
Okay, well, this Mets team had 89 wins last season and just added Juan Soto coming off of an 8-WAR season. I don't think Juan Soto is going to be an 8-WAR player this year, but I think he's going to be at least a 6-WAR player. So with that being said, I have the Mets winning 95 games and still coming in second to the Atlanta Braves in the division. Everyone's sleeping on Atlanta to a degree, I feel like, and I don't understand why. Maybe it's not the confidence in the back end of the rotation, but they have a lot of upside with Strider eventually coming back. Schwellenbach looks like an ace-caliber pitcher already. You're getting Chris Sale off of a Cy Young Award-winning season, and everyone, their mother, was either injured or had a down offensive year for Atlanta last year. So you can't expect that again. It's just like the 2023 Mets where everything went wrong, and then we saw what they did last year. Expect the same with the Braves this year. And I do think that they're going to go all the way back to the NLCS, but to your point, I have no clue what any type of championship success is like as a fan, truthfully. So to give you a quick rundown, I'm a Steelers fan for football, but my problem is that when they had their first championship that I got a chance to appreciate, that was around 08-09 against the Cardinals, but I was a kid and I really wasn't locked in. My first year I'm locked in, we lose to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, right? I'm a New York Rangers fan. First year I'm locked in, they lose to Adam Henrique in overtime. Devils lose in the Stanley Cup. So I don't know what it's like to experience a championship. Hopefully we can all enjoy this together as soon as months from now.
Yeah. Mets are going to be better than last year, but not by much. I have a 90 wins, finishing third. I do think that the Phillies, this is like their final hurrah. This is it for the Phillies. They have to get somewhere. I don't think they're going to get too far in the playoffs, but they're going to finish second. And the Braves, I think, are going to still be the best team in the NL East, unfortunately. I have the Mets losing in the NLDS, though, to the Dodgers.
Another defeat to the LA Dodgers.
It's painful. It's painful.
Look, I think that no matter how this season ends, if it doesn't end with a championship, we will all be very disappointed, but they got to make the playoffs. That's my attitude going into this season. We have rarely seen them make the playoffs in back-to-back years. It's only happened twice in their history, 99, 2000, 15 and 16. I was hopeful it was going to happen 22 to 23. We know that was a disaster. They got to get to the playoffs because I think my attitude in this modern age, until they change the playoff format, which they may do, we're going to have a lockout in a couple of years. So who knows what it looks like when we come out of it. Get to the playoffs every year. Just get into the tournament every single season. And then one of these years, hopefully you get hot at the right time and it all comes together. So hopefully we're sitting here for playoff baseball. But Wardy, I do appreciate you coming on. I advise everybody, check him out. YouTube, you could subscribe and check out his great content as a diehard Met fan. Thank you very much for making predictions with us today, man. I really do appreciate it.
Evan, it was an absolute pleasure. It was even better to meet you in person, obviously, a couple weeks ago. So thank you so much for that, and continue the great work that you're doing here on The Fan, not only with the Rico, but everything that you're doing live there on TV. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, man. I do appreciate that. Any comments, you can always email us, thericob@gmail.com. After opening day, we'll be doing instant reactions because we are finally there. Can you taste it? Can you feel it? Baseball season is upon us. Thank you very much for downloading and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.